Hi everyone, it's really great to be here. Truly appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing at Avo, how we're streamlining care with smart tools, and highlighting some of the work we're doing with Fresenius across dialysis clinics and with dietitians. And so, buckle up, it's gonna be a good ride. Quick agenda in terms of the discussion and my presentation. First, just wanted to go through the problem that we're trying to solve, and I think Dr. Shippey actually had a really nice lead-in into some of these underlying issues within workflows and clinical decision support that we are attacking head-on. Then I'd like to just give a quick overview of our approach to clinical decision support, how we're leveraging AI, our platform approach in terms of how we allow hospitals and our customers to build what they need with extreme rapidity and velocity. Finally, I'd then like to just double-click on our work with Fresenius over the last 1.5 to 2 years. It's been a terrific collaboration, and I'll share what I can in terms of the results so far. And then if we have time, we can talk about case studies with other customers, but I don't think we'll get there. So just a quick founding story of the company. I think this is important because it hits on a theme of clinician-first that we've been hearing right throughout the entirety of the day. I'm one of the co-founders. In my prior life, I was working as a software private equity investor, and I loved software. I hated private equity. I come from a family of 2 physicians as parents, and so I really had this, passion for trying to improve their lives, and I thought it would be a great idea to take my software experience and leverage that into healthcare. And so I did that at Columbia, explored that intersection during my MBA. I was fortunate enough to meet 2 physicians, now my co-founders, who are both hospitalists, they're both clinical informaticians, and they were building Avo for themselves as a way initially to get very complex clinical guidelines into their own workflows. If you talk to them, they'd be the first to admit they're not the top docs in the world. They need help. They can't memorize all the latest guidelines for every single disease state they might see, and that's really where technology, they saw, had a role in helping make them more efficient and make them better clinicians. And so over the last now 5 years, we met actually 7 years ago. They saw me as the business guy to help join them because they were just 2 docs who didn't really understand what revenue or expenses were. So we found each other at Columbia, launched out of Columbia, and then have been at it for the last now 5 years. And our team's 30. Really about 40 or 50% of the entire team is clinical, or they have an informatics training or some combination of the 2, and that's really part of our DNA. We are by clinicians, for clinicians, and I think our work speaks to that. Another just quick context on Avo in terms of where we are, who we work with. So we are specialty agnostic, disease state agnostic, clinician type agnostic, and we've been fortunate enough to partner with some of the leading healthcare organizations across the country. We're live in over 1,000 sites, and we're impacting and guiding about 100,000 clinical decisions every month, which is, it's great to see the growth. So let me walk you through the clinician experience, just in using an example from a hospitalist point of view. So they might have to sift through 8 different tabs in their charts to understand what's going on with the patient coming in, let's say with chest pain. They then might have to search through an external tool like Open Evidence, which has been discussed, or UpToDate if you're using old school articles, or some combination of the 2. Then they might have to go to an external calculator to calculate a risk score, and then they have to document what they're doing. Maybe they're using an ambient listening tool, maybe not, and then ultimately they have to submit documentation, orders, and billing. And this is for one single patient, then you might have a whole host of 30 patients, like Dr. Shippey was talking about in the hospitalist setting, that are right behind them. And so this is a problem because there might be point solutions that solve different parts of this fragmented workflow, but we're now creating point solution fatigue for the systems that have to implement these tools, that have to integrate these tools, that have to maintain these tools. And it's quickly becoming not sustainable. And so when we're thinking about this problem, right, we are thinking about this very holistically. We try to streamline and essentially occupy the entire workflow. And so this is an example of how we're helping hospitalists on the admission side. So we're embedded as a native tab within the EHR. We're across all the major EHRs in the US. The clinician doesn't have to leave their workflow to get access to our technology. And so we're first doing chart review. We're consolidating all the labs, vitals, meds, and even unstructured data like notes, gleaning insights, and combining that together into a single summarized view for the clinician. Great. Now that ambient listening tools are kind of gaining some traction across health systems, the ambient piece represents yet another piece of data that has to be included into the clinical decision, right? It has to be combined with the other EHR data in order to get to your clinical decision. Then we're leveraging and synthesizing that data and cross-mapping it to clinical decision support guidelines and clinical decision support rules. These rules can either be put in very easily by the hospitals and the organizations we work with, or we're also pulling in third-party guidelines like from societies like KDIGO, which is an official partner. We're doing all this processing on top of this mapping between the clinical decision support rules and the patient data, and then producing outputs for the clinician, like the things they actually need to do. There are notes that are optimized for billing. The notes have guidelines and recommendations embedded within them, and then we can actually pen orders in certain EHRs as well to help really automate that chart review to actually getting what you need to get done into the EHR. And so that's just one of our, what we're calling co-pilots or workflows. And really our view and our approach to clinical decision support is you have to embed it into a workflow that clinicians will go to. Because if no one's going to your workflow, like the CDS is totally ineffective, right? You have to be offering that individual clinician efficiency gains. You have to give them a ton of benefit from using your tool. And then our approach is guiding the CDS into that workflow. And so we've seen tremendous results from that approach. Again, not just for hospitalists, but really across specialties and care settings. And the reason why we can do this so kind of nimbly and across so many different areas is because behind the scenes we have a workflow or co-pilot builder. And so that allows you to, and the systems we work with, to drag and drop these different components of a workflow that they want to accomplish whatever CDS goals that they have. Right, so let's say you want to pull in a data extraction layer, and you only want to pull in notes from the last 6 months, and you only want to pull in these types of notes. That's all no code. And so now all of a sudden we're taking out IT from this work, which used to be a huge burden and a bottleneck towards getting these rules and getting these workflows into action. Hospital IT teams are constantly under-resourced, overstretched. And so this tool really allows the clinical teams to take charge of the clinical decision support that they're ultimately going to be using in the workflow. And so super customizable. You can put in your own rules. You can put in your own guidelines. And that's why we can kind of reach all these different arenas within the healthcare ecosystem. So just summarizing it all, right? We sit on top of the EHR. We pull in EHR data and patient data. We cross-map that to any clinical decision support reference material. We reason over that, and then we produce EHR actions. And then our customers and partners are using our off-the-shelf co-pilots that incorporate some combination of those actions, or they're building their own. And with Fresenius, that's what the work we're doing, where we're building these tools together. And so taking a step back, right, the challenge in dialysis clinics that Fresenius was seeing was that they had these really complex, really well thought out bone mineral metabolism algorithms. So here's like a quick screenshot of just one part of one algorithm, right, just to show you how complex these things can be. And so in the world pre-AVO, dietitians were tasked with trying to sort through these algorithms, compare this to all the recent labs and meds in the EHR that they were seeing with their patients, and then try to figure out what to do. Extremely difficult task, and even more difficult when clinics are busy and dietitians are stressed, and it's just difficult. And from an organizational perspective, Fresenius didn't have any ability to really track the usage and acceptance rates of the recommendations in the algorithms, and that's where we came in, right? We worked with the Fresenius clinical teams. I see Dr. Chadith back there, Shelley Nash, Amel Hamilton, some amazing champions who got this work with us going. And we worked with the clinical teams. We trained them on that workflow Copilot builder, took the Fresenius BMM algorithms, 8 of them in total, digitized them, and then integrated that into the EHR for Fresenius dietitians. And it sounds easy. It took some time, but in terms of how we actually structured this work, right, we had to integrate into the EHR so the Avo application could be experienced seamlessly and natively within the workflow and pull all the right data. The digitization of the protocols and the algorithms definitely took some time because these were not simple puppies. They were definitely full-grown beasts. And ultimately, right, the workflow that is being delivered to dietitians is the auto mapping of patient data with the clinical rules in the BMM algorithms, providing patient-specific recommendations, and then helping draft the notes based on those recommendations to really automate this workflow. We also set up dashboards to help track the acceptance rates, the usage of these algorithms, adoption rates. We actually put into these workflows accept reject buttons. And so if dietitians rejected the recommendations, we could track actually why and serve that data back to the clinical leadership at Fresenius. And it often highlighted, look, maybe this wasn't set up in the exact right way, or there were these areas where we could improve. And so we really used individual feedback from dietitians as a part of an iterative process. And then ultimately, now if Fresenius wants to make changes to the algorithms, instead of having IT work with clinical, come together in a process that takes many, many, many months, the clinical team at Fresenius just goes into the workflow builder, says, I change this, move this around, push to publish, done. There's some testing that has to go on. It's not quite as simple, but it's a much more streamlined process. So streamlined for the dietitians in terms of how they're actually going through their workflows and taking care of patients and making sure they're making the right medication kind of titration decisions, and also streamlined for the organization of Fresenius. Here's just an example of some of the dashboards we've been sharing with the Fresenius team. This isn't actually Fresenius data, but you can look at acceptance and rejection rates over time, double, triple click on why folks might be rejecting some of these recommendations, and really just a whole host of data that we share and kind of mutually view with the Fresenius teams on a weekly basis. So I can't exactly share the precise results of the work there because the results in the ROI data has been submitted for an abstract to the NKF for publication. However, I'll leave these quotes up here if you want to take a look. I can speak a little bit at a higher level in terms of what we saw. First and foremost, we saw nearly 100% adoption of our tool across 500 dialysis clinics. I think it's been our most successful implementation to date, and the main reason is because we had an incredible team at Fresenius that knows how to do change management, training, and consistent education. What's also really cool is if you look at the engagement rates over time, it's not just you use the tool like a typical kind of tech adoption curve and then it comes back down. We saw sustained nearly 100% consistent weekly, monthly usage, which is just really heartwarming to see because it means the users themselves are actually getting value from the tool. When we surveyed the users, we found consistently high user satisfaction, dietitian satisfaction rates. We're actually giving them technology that they like to use and they are continuing to use for their clinical care. When we took a step back and looked at some time savings data, pre versus post, a workflow that maybe used to take a few minutes now takes the matter of seconds. And so that's tremendous efficiency gains, and I think that also speaks to why the adoption rates are so great and why the satisfaction rates are so great. As an organization, right, we're anecdotally from the Avo side, we're saving IT labor costs in the order of hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. Again, I can't get too specific with some of the figures, as well as improved clinical outcomes like earlier initiation or increased utilization of vitamin D. Right, which is just really, really tremendous to see. And I'm literally at 5 seconds left, and that concludes my presentation. Again, thank you for letting me speak today.